Good afternoon and welcome to the Central Texas College Women's History Month celebration event. Before we get started at this time, I would like to have Chancellor Jim Yiannopoulos come and greet you for a minute, and then we'll get right into our program.
Thank you, Dr. Carter. Hey, greetings to everybody. Glad you could make it here. Glad some of you were able to skip your lunch to come to this. I think it's going to be really important. And it's our inaugural first annual, as I'm expecting more, right? We're going to do these over and over. But anyway, I think you're in for a real surprise. You know, we've got a lot of talent on this campus. And I think that we need to share that with the public and share that with you also, that next year we can fill up all of these seats. So again, thank you for coming, and hope you have enjoy your time here. Dr. Carter?
Thank you, Chancellor. I'm Michelle Carter, and I will be your moderator for today's presentation. Unless you want to. And so I am your moderator for today's event. Before I introduce our distinguished panel, we have a legend in our midst. We have Mrs. Bobby Weaver, CTC alumni, CTC board member emeritus. She is the Honorable Bobby Weaver, the first woman judge in Killeen. Thank you for being here today. It means a lot. And she's married to Rex Weaver, chair of the board of trustees. My apologies. So at this time, I would like to introduce our to be women, right? So from my left, their right, we have Dr. Melissa Gonzalez, Office Technology. Dr. Catherine Oser, Computer Information Technology Systems. Dr. Tracy, Social and Behavioral Sciences. Dr. Andrea Fosquet, Science and Agriculture. I picked up a bio, a program, because in that program is a copy of a brief bio for each of them. We couldn't tell it all, but you will see that these are some amazing women. So after today's event, please take the time to read them. Also, it was my idea to have them include a fun fact about themselves. And I think you will find them very interesting. I know that I did. So again, thank you, and let's welcome our esteemed panel for today. The theme for this year's Women's History Month is celebrating women who tell our stories. And through a conversation with these women in academia and leadership, we are going to hear their journey to the department chair position in higher education. I have a great love, and I say love, I have a great love and respect for these women. They are the linchpin. We provide education, we provide instruction, and they are the gatekeepers of the quality, the integrity of the curriculum, the relevance thereof, and as well as the course material. So thank you all so much for accepting the invitation to be here today. All right. Well, with that said, we are going to get right into the questions. And this first question is for the entire panel. And it's basically, so that just to put this in context for them, why did you agree to participate in today's panel presentation? Now, let me say this. I shared with these women, I said, be yourself. Be yourself. So what we see is what we get, and what we hear is who they are. Dr. Foster.
So I agreed to participate in today's panel discussion because I believe women have some unique personality traits that set us apart from our male counterparts, especially in leadership positions and in academia. The vast majority of you would agree, I hope, that women could talk your ear off, which makes us very convincing and deliberate in our communication. We are very inclusive in our leadership skills. We have the innate ability to dream big. We are inherent risk takers, so we make bold decisions and we challenge assumptions. But I think what resonates most with me is that women can be empathetic. We can lead from a place to create a team environment that is less authoritative and more cooperative. I think we bring a family feel to our work environment. And I think these are all very good leadership qualities to have in any career, but I think especially in academia. Thank you, Dr. Carter.
Thank you, thank you.
So I'm gonna go next,
Dr. As long as you have the floor.
because in case these two say something that's grand and beautiful, just get me out the way. So, Dr. Carter called and said, hey, this is what I'm thinking about doing. Do you want to be a part? I was like, I like you, so yeah. That's why I'm here. Because Dr. Carter is all right with me.
And that's that.
So what she said, but more than that. So first of all, thank you so much for putting this together. The idea of organization inviting us, this is amazing. I'm just truly thrilled to be part of this. This is the kind of event that I want to attend. So when she asked me to be part of the panel, I was excited because I wanted to attend. But then, of course, on the panel is a whole other thing. But over the years, students, well, there have always been female students, have approached me and kind of wanted to know more about my story. They see me as somebody who's successful, both having a family as well as a profession. And there are some females that really get excited about that, right? They're starting their journey in academia in order to achieve these goals. And so when they see a woman who's doing that, they want to feed off that energy. And so, when you brought this idea to us, I thought, well, I would, as you get older, you realize you've had a journey. And so I thought I would just love to be able to share some of that. I've done a few different things. And so if I can provide some of that energy and some of that hope for people, then that's what I want to do.
Thank you, thank you. Dr. Oster?
Well, I'm last, so I have to say what they said. But also, from me, it was, these ladies are my colleagues and they're also my friends. And I saw this as an opportunity to share publicly how diverse and different we are in our leadership styles and our personalities, but how we mesh so well together in our collective.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much. So now that we've set the stage and the tone for today's presentation, we'll jump right into our questions. And this is a conversation, so I'll ask a question, one of them will answer it, somebody will piggyback off of it, we may circle back to a previous question, but at the end, I think you will be inspired and encouraged by these women today, what they have to say. Also, there is time at the end, we will allow for questions from the audience. So, okay. First question, or second question here. We have your bios, which briefly articulate the journey to where you are today. At a time when the value of an education is questioned and enrollments remain a challenge for many institutions, why higher education as a profession? Tracy?
Sure. So obviously, I think higher education is important no matter what your career is, right? And statistics are clear. Studies show that, the higher education you have, the higher your wages are going to be, the more longevity you're going to have in your career, and the easier you can transition from one career to the next. So I think professionally, this is an important, thing to provide because I think everybody needs to engage in that. Personally, this as a profession has given me something that my previous, career paths didn't. I was always somebody who wanted a challenge and wanted a steep learning curve. I want to learn, I want to know more. And in my previous jobs, when that learning curve started to taper, I wanted to move on, right? What's the next step I can take in my career? But at, some point, it just started to get old. And then when I transitioned into academia, I would never think I'd be here 20 years later. Like the idea that I'm still here, I love this job, and the learning curve can be as steep as I want it to be. I have a terminal degree in what I do, and yet I haven't even touched the surface of what there is to know about my particular discipline, never mind, other disciplines. And so I love my discipline. I love engaging in it. I love my job, honestly. And so I think, both it's important for us professionally to provide this, critical function, but also for people who are looking for paths. Because I was certain I was never going to be a teacher. My parents were teachers, and I knew I wasn't going to do that. But it's very rewarding.
Thank you, Tracy.
Yeah, mine was more of an opportunity to touch lives. Coming from a military background, my dad was always gone. My mom made friends with all women of all nationalities, and we always gathered and learned about other cultures. And honestly, I didn't go into academia purposefully. I was going into IT, and I was asked if I would be interested, and I realized that was an opportunity for me to be a lifelong learner myself and touch others' lives and share with them my history, my story, and learn from them as well what their culture was.
Melissa?
Much like Catherine said, I did not intend to become an educator. I was in graduate school. I had a friend who was teaching here, and she said, hey, they have a position open in my department. What do you think? And I thought, I'll give it a try. And so I did, and I liked it. But what really moved me was the interaction with students. I had a student come to me one day. This was a couple days after she finished telling me how horrible I was and how nobody liked me. And I'll be honest, I went home kicking and screaming, right? Like, what is wrong with me? And I heard a little voice say, and I'll tell you what that voice said. The next day I go to work. She comes into the lab and she says, can I talk to you? And I'm thinking, oh, we're not going to do this in the lab. I got something for you. You want to go to my office? And so we go to my office. And she says to me, I tried to kill myself this morning. I said, oh, now, I have to be a big girl here. And what that voice said to me, listen, you're not just here for the subject matter. You're here to motivate and to mentor people who need your help. So pull it together. If every time somebody says something horrible about you, you're going to cry and walk out the door. I said, you're talking to the wrong one. I've been here for a long time now. Because I've taken that on personally. I'm not just here. Anybody can teach what I teach. And there are probably quite a few people who can do it quite a bit better than I do it. But I recognize that that's not my sole mission. I'm here for the people and to get them where they want to be. So I'm glad I got it.
Thank you, Melissa. Angela?
So everything they said. I really believe higher education is not merely about, attending classes, taking exams, earning a degree, It's about making new relationships, building those relationships. I think throughout your educational journey, most students are placed with others outside of their comfort zones. And I think that promotes new ways of thinking, that fosters critical problem-solving skills. And I think that's important for life in general, right? And for pretty much any career. because you live in an ever-changing, ever-evolving world. The environment constantly changes. So I think higher education, to me, what means most is that it fosters curiosity. Um, my educational journey was not a straightforward path. And I think it was my curiosity that helped me find my way, to find what matters the most to me, to find my calling in life. And so I feel like most of us here in higher education, we're here because of many different reasons, but for me, I think it is to foster that curiosity in my students so that they can realize their dreams and forge their own exciting paths forward. So I think that's why I find my my calling and my profession meaningful.
Thank you. I think yes, yes. I think the common theme that we heard here is that they want to help people. They want to help their students. They want to see people excel and be their very best. So thank you, thank you. Andrea, because you went last, we'll let you go first this time. Women wear many hats. As a daughter, friend, spouse, caregiver, parent, coach, counselor, homemaker, or a career woman. Millions of women have already left or are considering leaving the workforce. As professionals and leaders in academia, how do you navigate burnout stress? How do you set realistic goals and accomplish them without pushing yourself to keep up an unsustainable pace? And if at any time I need to repeat the latter part of that question, you let me know. Andrea.
That part of that is a long question, but it is an important one to address. I think chronic stress, burnout stress, it depletes our physical, mental, and our emotional resources. All across the spectrum of different careers, many organizations are coming out with new findings and researches and studies that suggest that pretty much everyone is experiencing an elevated level of stress in their work environment. There's data to indicate that women are more susceptible to burnout stress than men for many different reasons, but I think one big reason would be because we tend to have more responsibilities at home while also fulfilling all of those responsibilities at work. And so it's about finding a balance. And that I struggle with that every day. I think a lot of us struggle with that, women and men alike, at work. The way I have learned to deal with it is to acknowledge that we do experience burnout stress, right? And then to maybe even recognize what the problems are. What are my mistakes? What am I doing wrong? Acknowledge it and maybe find a solution. So I think some of the things that I feel I do wrong is I take on too much. The responsibilities get added on, the list keeps growing, it is a mile long. There's so many things that you have to get done, and most of us find it hard to say no. So it's important to set boundaries. I think it's important for us to realize that you need smaller, more reasonable goals. Goals that will set you up for success rather than failure, right? And if that goal is still not manageable, I feel like you need to reevaluate, just step back and reevaluate. And if that goal becomes a little smaller, that's fine. But as long as you get to the end and you're able to accomplish that goal successfully. The second mistake I feel like I make a lot is I go it alone. And I tend to rely on myself to get the entire project done or to accomplish the entire goal. And I feel the need to rely on the talent and the skill set of my team members, right? so that we can all work together as a group, and not all get burned out, and still accomplish our goals. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Dr. Foster.
I can take that.
All right, Dr. Wilson.
Andrea is correct. We do tend to not want to say no. We're flawed and struggle in making our boundaries. But one thing that helps a lot is text messaging these girls after work and venting. The sounding boards are really, really important. I have my online manager there, Karen. I call her and vent to her. I try to vent to my husband, but he doesn't understand academia. But he's like, because he's military, so he's like, why can't you just say this? Well, that's the Army. So it's mainly the goal of finding outlets to release that energy. And I'm not good at it. I'll be 48 in a couple months, and I still struggle completely at trying to set those boundaries, say no, and realize that I've taken on too much. So we grow as we go on, definitely.
Dr. Gonzalez.
So Andrea said a lot of what I was actually thinking. Number one, in terms of navigating, I realize I can't do everything. I also realize that even in my attempts to do what I've committed myself to do, that I can't do it by myself. And so that's step number one for me, just kind of the realization that you can't do it all and it's okay. Number two then would be that I tap into, which she also mentioned, I tap into the awesome resources around me, right? I work with a bunch of brilliant people who bring so much to the table. And so I tap into them for what it is I need for us to accomplish this goal. Because number three, I realize the goal is not mine alone. It's for the purpose of the college, right? And then I get to do what I do in my department because we fulfill the college's mission. And so it's full circle in my mind. And so when I have in mind that this is not mine, right? I'm going to do what I can to propel the mission forward. I'm going to use my resources to help do that. And hopefully, because we put everything we have into it, we pump out an answer, a solution, whatever it is that's needed that satisfies the mission, whatever that mission might be. The final thing, and I think it's important to say, I can't tell you why right now, but it's settling on me, is I disallow myself the having to prove anything. I often say, I don't know everything, but CTC didn't hire me for nothing. And that has to be enough. And I'm just talking for me. I have a job. I love my job, and that has to be enough. I did not sign up for a clown show. No acts here. I have a mission to accomplish. And so I disallow myself the need to prove anything. But then second of all, having to have the credit. So whatever is done, give it to whomever you choose. But I don't allow myself to walk away angry or upset because nobody said, good job, girl. And when I get there, if I ever get to that place, I go home and I say to my husband, honey, I did such and such. And my husband, I'm going to tell y'all, that's my friend. I love him much. He's right over here. Anyway, I say, this happened or that happened. And he gives me all the praise and accolades I need to come back the next day and do it again if I ever get to that place. But I do my very best not to allow that.
Thank you.
Yeah, so, this is definitely a question we could spend the entire time talking about, right? We'll try not to. But, so it wasn't until I got married and had kids that I realized that there were only so many hours in a day. Prior to that, professionally, I didn't get married and have kids to my 30s. So prior to that, I had been working and, you know, I could do anything. You know, you could take on everything they threw at you and, you know, do it. And so that, of course, changes. And so I think the trickiest thing is to find the right balance. You know, that whatever it is that puts on your plate, you need to find the right balance. And then even trickier is then finding peace with the decisions you've made about that balance. And I think generally speaking, women do carry a lot more of the burden because traditionally we're used to taking care of a lot on the home front. There are men who do that too, and I work with some of them who are part of the, you know, daily transportation things that, you know, typically are more, you know, going to fall on the women. But what I noticed that women do, we shouldn't, is we carry a guilt that I don't see the men carry, and a stress from that. You know, any minute I'm doing something with my kids, I'm guilty. I feel guilty that I'm not doing something at work. If I'm doing something at work, I feel guilty, you know, that I'm not with my kids. I'm looking at you. We were literally on the phone yesterday afternoon, and my son's calling me because guess what? I'm late picking him up, but I wanted to take care of this, right? And at the same time, I'm like, you know, you can only juggle so many balls, and everything's fine. Everybody's fine, right? You know, and so you just have to find this place where you are doing it all, right? But recognize what that means, you know, and then, you know, and yeah, take credit for how much you're doing.
My son, my middle son, who's now, he'll be 17 soon, but he had a project in elementary school, I think somewhere around the 3rd, 4th grade. And he had to fill out a poster all about him and his family. And somewhere on the poster was the statement, "My mom is good at," and he wrote, "working." Not acceptable. Not to me, not acceptable. Because as kids, I'll have them in my home, that deep influence for just a little while. And so I made a decision to sacrifice some things. I did not strive for leadership positions. I did not volunteer for everything or the things that I really would have liked to have been a part. But that was a choice, right? That was the choice I made. And I'm glad I made that choice. Things have changed just a bit, right? He's driving, he can do some things on his own. And we have 3 boys who are still at home. And, well, 2 boys, one is 2 and a half.
He's in college.
So I have the freedom to do a little bit more, but that was a sacrifice I made, knowing that my kids, they wouldn't be so small, so long. And when he grows up and somebody says, "My mom is good at," I don't want his answer to be working. I'm okay if he says giving hugs and kisses, being in my business. I'm all right with all of that. Anything that says my mom was present and she loved me, I'm fine with that, but working, no.
So there will be a part 2, our coffee chat, and we'll pick back up on this question. How many of you, the comments that they made, how many of you did that resonate with? Yeah. Men and women. We had a presentation here a couple of weeks ago, and there was some discussion between balancing and juggling. Balancing and juggling. And so having to constantly reprioritize throughout the day, throughout the week, but you all are doing very well. Thank you. Next question. As department chairs, you are dual-headed in that you are faculty, but also administrators responsible for student learning and outcomes, faculty management, curriculum, and selection of course materials. With these responsibilities and more, how do you establish and maintain an inclusive, engaging, and respectful environment or culture within your department? What aspects of your leadership style or philosophy contributes to your method? Another long question, I can repeat it, but I wanted to stimulate conversation. Who wants to go first?
Okay, I'll start. So I'm extremely spoiled. My department is staffed with amazing people. They are talented and they do their jobs exceptionally well. So what I do best is staying out of their way, right? But that's important because if I cluttered my plate with micromanaging, tasks, not only would that cause me undue stress, but then that would kill morale and they would stop performing like they do. So if you put the right people in the right positions, then you need to let them do what their job is and what they were, tasked with doing, knowing that they're going to do it better than, I will or you will. So that's important. I try to create spaces, for them to do what they do. Obviously, lots of engagement happens in the department, and that creates, just a lot of great things. And then trying to figure out what their needs are, what their problems are, and if there are ways that we can navigate through that, which we can't always. But I feel that's my biggest job is to kind of be their advocate and make what they do possible.
Thank you. Tracy?
Okay, so, like Tracy, I have a fantastic team, and putting my trust in them is what really, really helps. I like to think that I don't know everything, and I don't, and that's why we all have our own specialties, and I like to turn to my faculty and my staff for that purpose, because I have that trust in. I have the premise that you are doing your job until you are not. But then when you're not, I'm in your business. So I've established that rapport with my faculty and my staff, and I make sure I'm approachable. And in return, they accept that from me as well. They accept that approachability, and we become each other's sounding voice. So it's easy to have personal conversations with my group. And not to mention, we're computer nerds, so we're just weird anyway. We kind of stick together. Most people don't get our humor or anything like that, so we kind of have to talk together. But I think that's the biggest thing, is being approachable and putting the trust in my team that they deserve.
Fantastic.
I'd like to maybe make a few comments on bouncing off of your ideas, but more on creating an inclusive and an engaging work environment, right? That includes everyone. So my idea of inclusive environments is basically making sure that all of my faculty and all of my team members feel like they are important, contributing members to the entire team. I want them to feel excited and happy to come to work, which is oftentimes a difficult task to accomplish because of all of the different challenges that we face on a daily basis. But I think to me, it is very important that they are excited and happy to be there every single day. And so we do a few different things around the department to make sure that everybody feels included. The serious stuff, which is, of course, I have 6 different disciplines under my purview. And so if it was a discipline-specific topic that needs to be addressed, like curriculum, right, or textbook changes and things like that, I want to make sure that all the subject matter experts within that discipline feel included in that decision-making process, so that their voice matters. If it is, say, a department-wide solution that you're trying to see, this could be done through department department meetings that are held regularly, again, sounding boards, right? Just so that I'm not making those decisions all by myself because I am one person in the department, but we all represent the department. And so all of our voices should matter. And so at those department meetings, we may discuss things like, what would be an acceptable makeup exam policy for our courses? Or what are suitable instructional delivery methods for, again, my specific discipline, science and agriculture? How to spend the departmental budget. So that those are not things that I feel like I should be the one taking the lead on making all of those decisions. I would like that to be an inclusive team effort, right? And so we also find ways to celebrate each other. So we celebrate birthdays every month. So all the birthdays for that month, we have cupcakes or pie or cake, whatever. We have our Christmas parties. Again, this is to make everyone feel important and part of your department, that they are contributing towards your department. We have surprise, random appreciation events or collages or donuts might surprisingly, miraculously appear every morning, or one such morning. Not every morning. I take that back. We're going to deliver to you. That's right. You're welcome. All of you. Let us know so we can get enough collages. We also, I think it's important for us to celebrate our differences. The diversity within our department. So we may have potlucks, right, where everyone brings their favorite dish, and that might represent different parts of the country and all across the world. And so that those are ways that we foster an inclusive atmosphere within our department, where everybody needs to feel important. And that kind of goes back to what I led off with, is to create a family-based work environment. And that's important to me in my leadership position.
Thank you. Dr. Gonzalez?
I'll speak in terms of culture. So what we understand about culture is that the people in it create it. Somehow we sometimes separate, we attempt to separate the two. We think, well, then there's the culture here with all these wonderful people. Now, if it's a wonderful culture, yes, you can probably bank on there being a bunch of wonderful people. But if the culture is not so wonderful, you can bank on there being quite a bit of negativity. Now, it may be under the surface, the bottom line, it needs to be dealt with. Culture in my department is really very important. If I'm going to get up and be here from morning until night, I want to feel comfortable doing it. But I recognize it's not all about me. I want everybody else to come in. I want them to feel comfortable. One of the first things I did when I became department chair was meet with each of the faculty members and ask, what do you need from me that would help you finish at CTC as a career, right? Whether that's your goal right now or not, but think about this long term. What would you need? And I heard a lot of different responses, and some of that stuff I was really shocked by, mostly because I am really good at minding my business. I don't poke my head around too much, at least I didn't. But having heard from them, I recognize we do have a problem with culture. And so here are the guidelines, and I'll try to be quick about this. Number one, I start with myself, and I encourage the faculty to do the same. If there is a problem, look at you first. Look at me first. Is there something I said, something I did that created this wave in our culture, which I am attempting to make healthy, lively, positive, right? So start with me first. Number two, listen, let's deal with real problems. Real problems are not synonymous, or negative situations, I should say, are not synonymous with a negative culture. A problem is a problem, and it needs a solution. And so when there's a problem, we face it head on, we find the best solutions, and we get to the end of it. That way we can keep on with our positive, healthy, lively culture. The other thing is having conversations, right? If I recognize that there's something going on that I have not seen before, it's important to have a conversation, to ask the question, what's going on? And the truth is, those conversations are not always easy because we're talking about adults who have autonomy in their lives, every area of their lives. But I hope, which I think is the second part, maybe the first part of that question, that my being a relationship builder, and that's just how I see myself. I build relationships. I think that's important. It's the best way to the bottom line of anything. I would hope that in my genuine desire to get to know the faculty, to get to know the staff, to care about the things that they care about, that when I have these conversations, they see those conversations for what they are and not anything else, right? Not interested in being in your business, but I am interested in you as a person and your ability to sustain the pace at which you're currently working to the end, 20 years from now, 30 years from now. And then if this is not it, then let's talk about how we, what adjustments can be made so that we can get you to the place where you want to be. Now, I realize I've said that several times, but it is quite important to me. I'm more interested in where my students want to be. I'm more interested in where my faculty and staff want to be than I am in my own personal desire to get them to do and to be like me. And my hope is that with that kind of openness, they take away a little something that does propel them in their own personal lives.
Very good. What I heard from the panel, oh, I'm sorry.
I have one more thing to add, and I'm sorry.
Mhm.
I find it fascinating, and I don't know if everybody's caught on to this, that we up here seem to practice multiple leadership styles because it works for us, and it's really neat to find out how we've learned to process and be able to be democratic or autocratic or laissez-faire. You know, we've found a really good balance, and I just find it fascinating that we're able to learn and implement a variety of styles.
And what I heard from the panel is diverse as your styles are, the commonality is that you're trying to create environments where people feel a sense of belonging. One of my favorite quotes, and it's something that I endeavor to live by, was from President Roosevelt. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And that's what I heard in these last 5 minutes or so. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. John Armstrong, one of our board members, our supporting board members, and our chair, General Rex Weaver, has joined us. Thank you, sir. Next question. There is a follow-up to this. Questions. How do you navigate? We're going to start with you, so listen. How do you navigate the perception of how you should act or behave as a woman in leadership versus acting in a way that aligns with who you are? The follow-on to the previous responses will come afterward. So it's a two-part, but I won't ask that question until after the responses.
So I'm going to preface my response by saying that, in my opinion, within a professional setting at work, whether this be a leadership position or otherwise, I do not believe that women should act or behave any differently than a man. However, I do recognize that there are some unique challenges that women face while integrating leadership qualities with your core identity. An example being perhaps society traditionally expects women to be warm and nice as opposed to, or versus competent and tough, which is what's expected of many men and leaders in general. So I do think that women are uniquely positioned to be able to embrace both and to be able to do both. It's just about maybe finding a happy balance between your core identity and your leadership style, and what society may or may not expect you to behave like in your position. I think it's really important for anybody, and certainly women, to be authentic in your leadership style. I'm unapologetic about the person who I am, and it is who I am, and I'm going to incorporate whatever my core principles are, to lead with integrity, to do my best to lead with integrity, and with confidence.
Dr. Gonzalez, very good. So I heard you say that women should not act any different from men. I'd like to reframe that and say, for me, it shouldn't be a question. Because men are who they are, and women are not men. And women are who they are. So I can't remember if I said men, but you get what I'm saying. Men are who they are, women are who they are. That's the bottom line. And so for there to be an expectation that I personally behave some certain way because I am a woman is archaic.
Right.
It diminishes who I am as a person woman, who, by the way, is warm and kind, right? And nice. And I tell myself that every morning.
You remind yourself.
Yeah. And so I'll give you a situation I've run into before. The bottom line is being, and I am quite agreeable, I'm agreeable. There are a few things that matter to me so much that I'm going to fight you to the death about it. Some stuff, I'm going to use it, I'm going to say it, I just don't care about it very much. But then there are a few things that really do matter, and those are the things I'm going to go after. And so my being agreeable set one person up to think it was okay to speak to me a certain way, to toss papers at me, and this was all at one time, and to get really loud and quite indignant. And I'll tell you what I did, because I'm a woman, I'm nice and I'm kind, and I'm warm and I'm up with that, but I'm a person woman, right? And so the person in me got really close and said, you want me to do such and such and blah, blah, blah. And that person says yes. And I said, well, the next time you do that, and you don't throw another thing at me. They backed up so fast. I said, have it laid down. Right? Because, now I use that example because the expectation was that I would bend and scrape. Now, I don't know what part of me told you that was true. And I don't know what part of you told you that it was acceptable to treat me that way. But let's clear the air here. I'm not performing. So here's your part, and I'll do my part. Back off. So that's what I think about this question. I won't even look at it again, right?
and the conversation.
We're not cutting you off on this question.
If I could, I want to say I agree with Andrea. There shouldn't be, but we know there is. I mean, if you think back, President Nixon didn't want to put a woman in the Supreme Court, and he said it out loud. He said, because women are emotional and erratic. He said, some men are, but women are more likely. And I think that he was wrong in his choice, but right in his assessment that the wording was flawed, because we are erratic and emotional. But that's, I think, what adds to our abilities as a leader. It makes us more inclusive, more transformational. Women tend to not be driven by the authority or the title. We are driven more by the excitement and pleasure of completion of tasks and producing valuable students in the workforce. That stuff drives us way more than a title. And I think that's what you said, something about not looking for leadership. I wasn't either. It just kind of falls in your lap and you realize that I'm kind of got a knack for this, but it's never our intended goal to lead. We just naturally fall into that because we're kind of nice.
And we might be more, emotional in our approach, but I don't think our decision making is. I remember seeing a study, this was a while back, and they were looking at, corporate stock values, and they looked at it with those that just had an all-men leadership versus those that had a mixed leadership, and the stock prices were stable for the ones that had the, they all ended up in the same place. But how they got there was much more jagged when it was, all, men. And so, and I'm sure the dean can attest to the fact that we can get emotional. But I think in the end, what you get, you're very good about just letting us get there. But in the end, what you get is just really solid stuff. And I think that's important. And I will say, I think, I've seen a difference in the years that I've been working in just how people engage with me. If you don't mind, I'll share one story. So when this didn't affect me, but I saw it when I was an auditor. As an auditor, you get to see everything, right? So that's one really cool thing. And I started out as a bank auditor, and I remember one bank that I went into audit, and I would, you go into these banks and you audit them for different things over the years. And so I was in this one bank, and there was a president who was a man, and there was 3 loan officers, 2 were men and 1 was a woman. And as I would go in and out of this bank, I noticed that the female loan officer was the person who got the president coffee and the person who made copies for him, right? And so I just remember seeing this thinking, I wonder if she would, well, at first I thought she was the secretary. I actually thought that. And then I realized, because, you start to learn. So then I realized, no, she's one of the loan officers. And then I thought, I wonder if she had been his secretary, and then she was promoted. And so I finally, at one point, I was doing a personnel audit, HR audit. You do, look at HR and payroll. And no, she had come in from the outside just like the other 2 loan officers, and man was getting paid a fraction of the price with the exact same credentials coming in, and she's doing the same job, except she's doing a lot more, right? And I've seen a lot of that. Now, I can say I've never been in that position, but I've seen a lot of that. And so I'm grateful that I haven't personally experienced that. And I think now I don't see it as much anymore as well, but it's also might be I'm not in banking anymore. I don't know. So it's definitely, real.
One more thing, Andrea had mentioned being authentic, and I think that's something that all of us are really good at doing. Because when you're authentic, it comes across, and people tend to feel they can be authentic. Me changing my values for my job is not going to do anything for anybody but perpetuate a stigmatism, a problem. So we all need to encourage authenticity and be authentic ourselves. And sorry, not sorry, right?
Sorry, not sorry. Thank you. So the follow-on question, I think Dr. Gonzalez actually already touched on this, and you may or may not have encountered. So what, if any, stereotypes or assumptions have you encountered, and how do you handle such biases? I think you already answered that.
May I just throw in one thing? So Andrew mentioned creating a family culture, and I will say I have no arguments with that, because it works. It absolutely works. The other side of that could be, and I have seen it, this sort of mommy mentality, right? And while I'm happy to support a student's efforts, I'm happy to support the efforts of my colleagues. I'm not your mother. I am nurturing. So I hope I'm not coming across as hard, because that's certainly not what I intend. There is a job to do, and I expect you to do it. I'm not your mother where you still get your allowance. But I've seen that. So like, you understand, you're caring, and I have to say, I also have a job to do. And part of that comes with this. And I'll leave it.
I think I just heard you say that even in the inclusion, even in the creating that sense of belonging, there are boundaries that should mitigate any familiarity, any unwarranted familiarity, correct?
I like it.
Okay, that's what I heard. Okay. Anyone else have a response to the following?
I do. I don't have to take over the social deal. One thing that is valuable for me is that I have experienced a lot of stereotypes over my life. Coming from a blended mixed family, ethnicity-wise. My mother is half Black. I grew up in the 80s, and I saw the remnants of the racism. I have been in jobs before. I worked in auto parts stores and been flat out told the only reason I was hired because I was 3D. But what's neat is I've never encountered anything direct like that in academia. It's interesting how it's more cloaked. And I'm not accusing anybody of anything, because we all have subconscious biases. But navigating that, for me, I kind of tend to ignore it. I mean, I just push through. I view myself as just like anybody else. And if I get the sense that there's something, of someone's stereotype opinion kind of floating into the scenario, I just plow forward with the work and the expectation there's a task to be done. And we're going to get it done. Doesn't matter who made a mistake, who was at fault, who thought of the idea, who gets recognition. I just kind of push myself forward with that and set it aside. So it doesn't tend to bother me too much.
So you don't internalize somebody else's behavior and assumptions, etc., biases. And that's very good. Did you hear that? She doesn't internalize other people's behaviors or assumptions. And I think that's really important.
I think that's necessary for longevity, because if you pause at every injustice, at every slight, then you'll never get the work done. And I think that's something that we as women do well. I will follow on and say this: just because we don't say nothing, don't mean we don't know nothing. And just because we don't do nothing, don't mean we haven't thought about it, right? So nobody's confused.
Very good, very good. This is good. Is everyone enjoying this? This is very good. How do you empower and help female colleagues excel as leaders or pursue other upward mobility opportunities? And there is a column.
Okay. So I want to say that I don't make a beeline to females or to female leaders. That's certainly not it. I see something, it strikes me as growable, and I make my way towards that. Not to force growth, but to inquire about what the individual wants. Because we are talking about women, however, I'll speak to that. And my experience has been much like Tracy's, where women will approach me to ask, how did you do that? How did you get here? How did you do? Or they may approach about something totally different. My student population, so when I say our, I mean in the office technology department, is a little bit different. We have professionals who are reskilling or upskilling. We have older adults who are making a huge life change. We have adults who, for the first time, are entering or thinking about entering into the workforce. And so they come with lots and lots of experience, but sometimes very little esteem. Sometimes with very little confidence. And so they may not be asking about my specific journey, but rather, how do I get to do what I want to do? And that's where I think mentoring comes in, mentoring and coaching. Because even if I personally can't do it, I want to lead you to the people who can help you get there. How do we start with where you are and what you have and propel you forward? And so having discussions with women about what it is they truly desire, not what anybody else wants from them, not what they think they should have done or how they should have done it, but what you really want. That's the first conversation, and it usually is the longest conversations, because what I find is they don't really know, and it's okay. And my first bit of advice when they don't know is, well, let's try something. What are your hobbies? What brings you joy? Let's go in that direction until they find just the right spot. That's exciting. That's where you want to go. We had a student in our program who's actually interested in pharmacy. And I did ask the question, why do you need it? Because it's fair, right? There's more than enough to go around. Don't get me wrong. Anybody want to enroll, we have more space for you. But because I'm interested in the person, I feel like there's more than enough to go around. What do you want? So she was really very interested in pharmacy, but had heard from someone that she wasn't good enough. That was the bottom line. She wasn't good enough to do it. She just couldn't. And so I have a friend who is, in fact, a pharmacist, has been for the past 30 years, works at the VA. She doesn't compound anymore, but she does administrative stuff. I called that friend and I said, hey, will you talk to this person? She said, absolutely, positively. Let me give that person, the student, her personal information. Do you know that woman is now in Michigan in a pharmacy doing what she wanted to do? That's exciting. And so the question was, how do you inspire women? By asking the right questions and walking with them along the way to get there. Baby steps sometimes, but they get there.
Excellent, excellent.
I agree. I don't beeline for women, and I have to admit, I probably don't mentor and support other women as much as I should. I get rather busy, and that kind of gets to the side. But I think the most valuable thing that I do personally is model resilience and humility. Those are really key factors for any woman, especially in my field. I mean, I've run into so much with being in IT and computers. I've been told, well, you think like a man. what does a man think like? I don't understand that. But being able to bounce back from those kinds of comments, being able to bounce back from anything, any challenges that I run into in this field, and being practicing humility. Yeah, humble about everything that I do, and realizing that I'm not the only person out there.
Talking that just a very good comment, based on what Melissa and Catherine have been discussing. I think most of us need role models in life, in your family as well as at work, right? We all look up to somebody, and that somebody could be male or female. In fact, most of my role models have been men. But I think it's important, to your point, that women need to step up more to not just kind of be in your own little world and do your own thing. Not that you don't have a whole lot to do, right? But also kind of understand our responsibility as women leaders to be those role models, as mentors, like you said, to everyone, right? I mean, whoever you lead or whoever watches you as an example. But I think women look up to women, other women, as role models because they can see that you've been there and you've done that. You've accomplished, overcome all of these hurdles and whatever those obstacles might be. And you probably continue to do that every single day. And that's important for them to see that we are human and we're constantly changing and we're adapting, but we're still accomplishing everything that we set out to do, or for the most part, that we set out to do. And I think that's important for other women to see, because you're able to balance your family and your work life. And others, I think it would be inspiring for other women to be able to see that you can do that, means yeah, I can do that as well. So.
That's really very interesting, and it brought to mind my background. So I went to an all-girls high school. I loved it.
Me too.
Right? Right. I went to an all-girls college. I loved it, right? So I grew up in a culture where women were supported and championed, cheered on. And so helping any woman, right, is second nature. It's not even a thought, right? This is just what we do. We don't, now please hear me, we don't compete and we don't fight. Now, I'm not saying, listen, if there's some sort of sport, there's competition, I'm not talking about that. But you get to be who you are. And I get to clap and cheer you on, really, genuinely, authentically, because you allow me to be who I am. And we're two very different people who have taken on this role here. And you're doing it pretty okay, right? I was looking for my supervisor. We're doing pretty okay. But the point is, as women, and especially having that sort of background, it's second nature, and things that are situations that are not like that do seem a little foreign. At least they do to me.
So it's interesting that you two have that background because I was not, I don't know about you, Tracy. So I guess there's 2 and 2. And I find it funny that Andrea said she had mostly men mentors, which I did as well, which started with my dad. My dad, from the moment I was going to school, he impressed upon me that you're not going to have to depend on anybody. I'm going to make sure that you don't have to ever depend on anybody. So, and he was not playing because when I went to get my license, I had to change the tire, pop the clutch to start the car, change the oil, and top up all the other fluids before he would let me go to the DMV and get my license. So that was kind of drilled into me, and that kind of led me to gravitate more towards men mentors, I think. And possibly, I think that's what gave me my I don't care, sorry, not sorry attitude. And I don't see that line as much as most people do because I wasn't around that culture so much. So I think that's interesting. We're kind of divided on that, but we still are successful at what we do.
Excellent, excellent. The follow-on to that, if you have an example here, is please share a time in your career when you were empowered and received the support needed to become a more effective leader or to pursue a promotion. So what's the flip side if anybody has a testimonial? All right, Dr. Foster.
So, like I mentioned, I've had mostly men as mentors during my graduate career, prior to teaching when I was in research, and of course, even in my teaching career. And of course, you can learn a lot from both men and from women. We all bring our own leadership qualities. An example that comes to mind is my most recent mentor, and he still continues to be that way, and that's my predecessor, the previous Department Chair for Science and Agriculture, Marvin Price. So I had a research background for 10 to 12 years, and my first teaching position was when I accepted this position here at CTC. So I had zero teaching experience, and so there was a lot for me to learn. And I was constantly watching and learning from others. 4 years into my teaching career here at CTC, Marvin sat down with me and he asked me, what are your future goals? What are your future career goals? And I'm like, continue teaching. and he asked me, well, you know what, I'm thinking about retiring. Do you see yourself stepping into a leadership role and becoming the department chair? And I laughed at him and I said, I don't share your opinion at that time. I didn't feel like I was ready for that. But he believed in me, and the next year he provided several different opportunities in a very sneaky way. Just provided me different opportunities to learn more about leadership, to learn more about admin-related decision-making processes and other responsibilities like that. And every time he engaged me in those activities, he got me thinking and got me to realize that maybe I would be good at it. Maybe this is something that I need to give more thought. And so he helped me realize that if I put my mind to it, and if that's what I wanted to do, I could step into a leadership role, besides teaching, right? And so yes, a year later, 5 years into my teaching career, I became the first female department chair for science and agriculture. So, and I thank him for that, because I didn't see that in myself, and he did, and he was a very patient mentor with me, and he still continues to be that way, because he's my sounding board. And he helped me explore something that I didn't think I was ready for. I thought maybe in another 10 years, but he said, I'm retiring next year, and I think you might be ready in another year. And that's what he helped me realize. So I thank you for that.
You are doing an amazing job. Thank you.
I have a very similar story to Andrea. Since we're dropping names, I'm going to drop a name too. Laszlo, a lot of people know my Laszlo. In 2004, I pushed really hard, and Mrs. Gibson, she was one of the instructors in the department, to get me a job as a lab assistant in the department, and Laszlo was my supervisor. And from that point forward, that man pushed me so hard, and I didn't see it. I had no aspirations of anything, but I finished my associates. He said, what's next? And I'm like, what do you mean, what's next? There's the bachelor's. So I got the bachelor's, and the faculty position opened up. And he was like, what's next? I mean, he was just so encouraging and motivating. And every time I had self-doubt, he gave me that positive energy, that feeling that, you know what, I can do this, even though I don't think I can. And, and then I got my bachelor's, I got my bachelor's, and he said, okay, let's go for the master's. And I'm like, Leslie, you're killing me, And he encouraged me and pushed me, and then I ended up being his supervisor. And we worked so well together. We had this bond. I mean, he just mentored me so well and encouraged all my my self-confidence to boost that I went forward mostly because of him, not of anybody else. And he's still, even though he's retired, I miss him. I call him quite often. Just to vent.
Very good. I love that. Both genders. I love it. I love it. See, a mentor can be anyone, right? Dr. Cook. This is my last question, and then we're going to go to the audience. We may have time for just one question, so I'm not sure who the lucky person will be. Serving as faculty and administrator simultaneously requires that you sometimes negotiate a solution or outcome with multiple stakeholders, for example, students, faculty, and your institution. As a mid-level manager or administrator, how do you prepare for and execute the task at hand?
Yes.
That's a deep question, isn't it?
I would say anybody who wants to be a mid-level manager, buckle up. It's going to be a bumpy ride. Being a department chair is fantastic. I love it. It's an excellent job. And at the exact same time, it is the most frustrating job. Period. And like at the exact same time, right? Not even like one, at the exact same time. So I truly do believe that, when decisions are made, all the stakeholders need to be at the table. The more information you have, the more ideas you have, the better, solution, whether it's a policy or whatever, the better that's going to be and the more effective it's going to be. And so kind of at my level, so first of all, we're perched at a really nice spot where we can see a broad section of what's happening. And I love that. I love seeing as much as possible. So that's rewarding, and it does give us the ability to then think about things outside of our little piece, right? See how it all fits together. But we're not quite high enough where we actually then decide what's going to happen, right? And so to the extent that I can, and, with what we do, I do try to get, all pieces together so we can come to a solution. And when I know that I'm just not part of that conversation, I go to my boss and make sure he knows everything that I'd like to have conveyed. And sometimes, my boss may not be in the conversation. I'm like, hey, can you push it up too? So I think the idea is that just include everybody. That's the way good decisions are made. I think academic institutions are unique. Most everybody that's full-time in my department has a doctorate. These are very educated people. These are people who know how to think. They know, get them to brainstorm something. They will help you. And we have an institution full of people who just are really exceptional. And so that's unique. I think not all businesses are situated like that. And so I think it's just important to get as much input from as many stakeholders as possible. That's my thought.
Thank you.
And I have to follow up on what Tracy said. And then go have Tracy with friends. That's right.
Later on. I think negotiation is the hardest part of my job. It's the part that I like the least, that I struggle with the most, and causes premature growing as well. A lot of stress. I'm constantly learning how to deal with negotiating skills on a daily basis. And like you said, there are different stakeholders. So I think my approach is, my end goal is never an all or none approach. I try my best to where there's not going to be one winner and one loser. Sometimes hard. But whenever possible, I want to make sure that a deal will be reached, or whatever solution is reached that's going to benefit or be a good option for as many, and across all of the stakeholders. But that's a challenge. That really is a challenge, and a lot of sleepless nights sometimes, just trying to figure out how to negotiate that challenge. So how do I approach this? For me, know my audience. So information is key, right? There's power to having the most amount of information. So do a very thorough investigation of whatever the problem is. Collect as much of the data, research as much as possible. So before the negotiation, you go in as prepared as you can possibly be. And I think there's a psychological element here as well, because I have to prepare myself mentally before I go in and sit down with everybody involved when it comes to negotiating a solution. I need to be in the right frame of mind. When I go in, I feel like I hope I'm the most prepared to be able to navigate that conversation. I try to be empathetic. I try to listen to everybody's side of the story, because everyone has something important to say, and it is of meaning to them, right? So it's important to listen to everything and be flexible in your mindset. But I always try to be a moderator in the discussion. I do not like a runaway train, so I try to communicate as effectively as I can and control the agenda and to kind of steer everybody towards a common goal, which was the whole purpose of the negotiation, I think. And then when I feel like discussion has been had and we've got enough information, then we hopefully come together with an acceptable solution for everyone. And sometimes the solution is fantastic and everyone's happy. How often does that happen? Never. Right. So then, of course, my approach would be compromise, if possible. Can you find an alternative solution that would be hopefully as acceptable as the original one? And that's what I like to do for the most part. But there are some times that I feel that I'm very strong or very firm in whatever that solution is that I've offered. And in those situations, I'm not easily swayed and I will not back up.
Well, and always, when the right people are involved, the solutions almost always are satisfactory. I have yet to have an experience where all the different pieces of the puzzle were together and they weren't able to come to it. It's when you don't have the pieces of the puzzle together, then that's
I think another thing that really sways good compromise or a solid solution is people's motivation, because you can have people in the same room, right? Everybody who needs to be here is here. But if the motivation is different, you're never going to come to a place where you're satisfied with the end. My motivation is to do A versus to do B, C, and D, then how do we even come to a compromise? Because what I've learned is people want their way, right? And that really is no place. There's no place for that in what we do, because we're making decisions that will affect the institution as a whole. We're making decisions that will affect the students we serve. And if my motivation is simply to serve me, then there's always going to be a problem. But I agree with you both. It helps to have all the stakeholders present. It helps to hear as many voices as you can. It helps to not be so firm in what you want, but willing to make a compromise. If compromise is, if it's feasible, right? But we also have to be sure that everybody understands what this thing is about. This is what this is about, and nothing more, nothing less.
Great, great. Thank you so much. Well, we are approaching the hour. So is there anyone in our audience who has a question for our distinguished panel? We have to make it quick because we're going to give them an opportunity to leave you with at least one pearl of wisdom should they choose. Anyone have a question? All hearts and minds clear? All right, so before I bring up our chancellor, is there anything that you want to share? 30 seconds.
One thing I'd like to share, and this is not just for women, it's for anybody. When you take on a job, you have to know the why. It may not be in your purview and your tasks, but knowing the greater picture helps tremendously. So if that was one piece of advice I had to give somebody, I would make sure you know why your job is important to the entire mission.
So I'm looking forward to these continued conversations and dialogue. I think it's wonderful. I learn from these ladies all the time. And the idea that we could do this at a larger scale is amazing.
I think in any position, leadership or anything else, I think it's important to constantly challenge yourself and find new ways to discover yourself and different possibilities. I think it keeps it simple to just keep going every single day.
I would say, don't be afraid to make midterm corrections, right? So we've been doing this and you can read all about it for however long we've been doing it. And I personally have not always done it well. And I'm still figuring things out. And as I learn and grow, I find that I'm best when I don't just keep going with the same old mess, but fix what needs to be fixed and keep moving on.
Thank you, ladies. Let's give our panel a hand.
Wasn't this powerful?
Yes.
Yeah. We're going to do this again, right? Continue this and grow this. I think I have some, I identified a lot of what they said, or most of what they said. Yeah, go, come on down. So I guess I have some history in there. I have three powerful, very powerful deputy chancellors who are all ladies. And what I'm going to do, I have brought with me, let me get it. I brought a challenge point for each of you to thank you for your commitment and your challenge to keep doing what you do. Thank you again. Let's have a round of applause for you. Jump in here and do a picture with them. Come on. Yeah. Okay, well, I'm on one side, you go on one side.
And that concludes, one more round of applause for this. I'm humbled and honored to know them. Thank you so much for coming. That concludes today's presentation. We greatly appreciate your patience and your support, but I trust that you've taken something away with you today, as they've imparted and shared their lives with you. Have a great afternoon.
The ladies.